Well, hey, LCBC, if you were with us this past weekend, then you heard me talk about the fact that I believe now is the time for a transition in the leadership at LCBC. 31 years ago, God brought Ruth and I to Pennsylvania from Texas to lead a little church of 150 people that eventually became LCBC. Never did we dream that it would become what it's become today. And never did we believe that LCBC was ours. We simply believed that God was graciously allowing us to lead here. And we are constantly saying, thank you, God, for allowing us to serve here at LCBC. But now we believe God is saying to us that it's time for a transition. It's time for a new season for LCBC. So 1 year from this weekend, I'll be transitioning out of the position of senior pastor at LCBC. I won't be retiring. Rather, I'll be transitioning to a new role here at LCBC. But this past weekend, a 12-month clock started ticking. You see, about 9 or 10 years ago, I was challenged by business leader Jim Collins to make sure that LCBC was better once I was gone than when I am here. And since then, that's been my mission, to make sure that LCBC will be better when I'm gone than when I'm here. And now I believe that LCBC is ready for me to begin transitioning out of my role as senior pastor. But what you need to know is this transition won't be easy for me or for Ruth. You are our family. I have no hobbies, and for the past 31 years, our lives have been all about our family of Justin and Ashley and our LCBC family. As Ruth and I were actually debriefing this past weekend, Ruth said that while driving to church on Saturday evening, it felt as though she were driving to a funeral. And I said that I felt the same way, but for me, it actually felt like I was driving to my own funeral. And this is tough. But as difficult as this transition may feel, I know that this is the right time to begin making this change. Because of experiencing God's leading and His nudges and His peace in this matter, I know this is the right time. Because we have strong, stable, and seasoned leaders guiding our board of elders and leading our staff, I know this is the right time. Because we're financially stable, even actually debt-free. And because we have great plans to expand with new locations in the near future, these are just some of the many reasons that I believe this is the right time to begin the transition. But the final reason I believe this is the time for the transition is because my replacement is ready. After spending the past 8 years or so working through a development plan to strengthen him as a communicator, as well as both a business leader and a spiritual leader, it's therefore both my recommendation and it's the recommendation of the LCBC Board of Elders that Jason Mitchell become the senior pastor at the end of next November. And here's what you need to understand. This decision is not based on my being ready to retire. Instead, this is a decision based on the fact that Jason is prepared and Jason is ready to lead. Jason's been on our staff for about 19 years, and I've had a front row seat while watching his growth and development, and I'm excited about Jason leading us into the future. So over the next few weeks, you'll be hearing more about our plans with Jason. You'll receive letters and emails. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions. And if you're an LCBC partner, you'll be asked to vote and affirm Jason as the next senior pastor the weekend of December 11th, 12th, and 13th. And in the meantime, I'd ask you to pray. Pray for Ruth and myself, and pray for Jason and his wife Jenny, as well as praying for our entire staff and church family, that we may honor God through this process and continue on our mission of introducing more people to Jesus and together fully following Him. And if you're a partner at LCBC, be sure to join us the weekend, December 11th, 12th, and 13th, when we'll vote to affirm Jason as the next senior pastor of LCBC. And if you missed last weekend's gathering, you can go back and hear more about this transition by just going to the church website, lcbcchurch.com. LCBC, you need to know that I love you. I'm excited about all that God might have planned for the future of LCBC and as we move into this next phase in the life of our church.
Well, it's almost, thank you. It's almost hard to put into words, to be honest with you, just how incredibly honored and humbled I feel to be put forward as the next senior pastor here at LCBC. You know, for 19 years, over 19 years now, I've had the unique privilege of watching up close and personal the exceptional leadership that David has put on display. I've seen firsthand his relentless commitment to keep our church focused on the mission of introducing more people to Jesus. And as I've said before, at a real personal level, I am a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better man, I'm a better pastor because of David's leadership and influence in my life. And perhaps most importantly, I know Jesus more deeply because of David's unique impression on me. And because of that, I've had two competing emotions that have lived kind of side by side inside of me. On one hand, it's hard for me to imagine an LCBC without David and Ruth in the role that they have served so faithfully in for 31 years. And so I feel a level of sadness, to be honest with you, processing David transitioning out of his role and into a new one here at LCBC. And on the other hand, I feel incredibly excited about the future of our church and continuing to see where God might be leading us as a church in the days ahead. So I just say that to affirm that you can hold both of those emotions, both of those things side by side, and it be okay. Over the last couple of weeks, as we've started sharing about this transition, I've had a lot of people reach out to me. I've had a lot of people ask me different questions. And there's one question in particular that struck me a few weeks ago that I was asked. My friend Jeff Kaler, he actually works on here at the church. He leads our expansion efforts. And Jeff was one of the very first people we talked to about the transition. And I sat down in Jeff's office, and we were just talking about some things. And then he just kind of looked at me, and he just said, "So do you feel ready? Do you feel ready?" And I looked dead into Jeff's eyes, and with as much confidence as I could possibly muster, I just said, "No." I wonder if you've ever had a moment in your life that you felt compelled to step into something new. And you felt a lot of things as you considered stepping out into something new. You felt a lot of different things, but ready was not one of them. And let's talk about a little bit deeper level here for a second. Have you ever felt a nudge by God in your life? You felt nudged by God to follow through on something that you knew God was prompting you to do, but you don't feel ready for it yet? And that can be big things, that can be little things. You feel a nudge by God to send that text to that person that your relationship has been a bit fractured. You feel a nudge by that, but you're like, "I don't know if I'm ready." You feel a nudge by God to end a relationship that you know is destructive. There's a part of you that's like, "I don't know if I feel ready for that." For some of you, you felt a nudge from God for a job shift, a move, a breakup, a proposal. It's time, guys, for some of you, I'm just saying. Some of you have felt nudged by God, but whether or not to start having a family or trying to start having children. Some of you have felt a nudge by God, from God, to step into a new role. And there are some times in our life, I don't know if you ever felt this, that as clearly as anything, that God is nudging you to step into a new opportunity. And as compelled as we are to say yes to that nudge that God is giving us, living right next to that is fear and doubt and insecurity that screams, "You're not ready." And guys, listen, for far too many of us, that has kept us on the sideline. We've stayed on the sideline and we've refused to follow through on new opportunities that God has placed in front of us because we just didn't feel ready for it. So here's the question I just want to wrestle with for a few minutes. How do you and I find the courage to say yes to God's leading, even when we don't feel ready for it? Where does that come from? And how do we move forward? As followers of Jesus, there are a few things that we just fundamentally believe to be true about our lives and about the world. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, then you believe that there is a personal God. You believe in a God that is personal and involved in our lives, that God has a good plan for your life. He has a unique purpose for your life right now. And in some ways, that can seem and sound a little bit daunting. Like there's all this pressure now. We got to go find what's that unique purpose for my life that God has. But we don't have to feel a pressure with that because Jesus actually told us what it was. After Jesus has resurrected from the dead, he gets his closest followers together and he gives them this charge. This is what he says in John chapter 20, verse 21. He says, "As the Father has sent me, just like I've been sent into this world," here it is, "so I am sending you." I'm sending you. Sending me to do what, Jesus? Jesus says, to point people to me, to love people as Jesus Christ would love them, and to keep pointing people to Jesus. Which means this is why the pressure's off a little bit. Because what this means is that whatever role you might have in your life, and we all got a lot of different roles here today. Some of you, you're in the role, you're a homemaker. Some of you, you're a boss. Some of you, you're an employee. Some of you, you're a student. It might be the role of coach. You're a teacher, pastor, neighbor. You fill a lot of different roles in your life. But part of what Jesus is getting at is that all of those are just platforms to be used to do the real work, to point people to Jesus. And Jesus is saying, he's almost mandating, it's almost like he's promising that if you follow me, I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna send you into situations to point people to me that you may not feel ready for. And one of the things that always strikes me whenever I read the scriptures is just the amount of times that God invites people to say yes to his leading. And it becomes very obvious very quickly that they didn't feel quite ready. Moses shows up in Exodus, says, I want you to lead. Moses says, I can't lead, I'm not ready. Have you heard me speak? Have you heard me stutter? I'm not ready. Shows up to Gideon, I want you to lead. I can't do that, God. I can't do that. I'm too insignificant. Shows up to Mary. I'm just a young girl. Shows up to Peter. After Peter has denied Jesus, he says, I've messed up too bad. Over and over again, you see men and women who are reluctant to say yes to the leading that God is putting on their lives because they don't feel ready. And yet that doesn't disqualify them from God using them. I don't know about you, I'm real happy about that. It doesn't disqualify them. Apparently, your and my, like our feeling of being ready, that's not a prerequisite for God to call you into something greater for your life. And what's so inspiring to me is all the times when they willingly, these men and women of faith in the scriptures, they willingly step into God's invitation for their lives, even when their fears and their doubts and not knowing and they're ready, they still move forward. In fact, there's this one passage. It just became for me almost like an anchor over the last year as I've been processing the potential for my own life to step into something new. About saying yes to something that God has, even though I may or might not feel ready. It was actually, it's a passage and it's a statement that the Apostle Paul made in the middle of a letter that he wrote to some followers of Jesus living in the city of Ephesus. It's so vulnerable, as you'll see in just a second. It's so honest. And in this passage, Paul just says something absolutely remarkable. That if we were to let what he says here just settle down into our hearts, I'm telling you, man, it would free us. It would free us to say yes to whatever God is inviting us into, even when we don't feel ready. This is what he says. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. Paul said, by God's grace and mighty power, I have been given the privilege of serving him by spreading this good news. Paul's like, I know I've been sent. I've been sent. And then he says this, though I am the least deserving of all God's people, he graciously gave me the privilege of telling the Gentiles about the endless treasures available to them in Christ. Man, I love that statement right there, that last verse. Though I am the least deserving of who? Of all God's people. Paul's like, he's like, I'm not saying I'm the least deserving of all the apostles. I'm not saying the least deserving of all the people in my family. I'm not saying the least deserving of all the people in my little community. I'm saying line every single one person up in this world, I'm last. Over the last year, I came across, the whole idea of imposter syndrome. Have you heard of this? Like what it means to kind of live with an imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome it's when you step into something, like a new role or something like that, and you feel like a fraud. That's kind of the bottom line. And you live with this sense, this heaviness, this kind of pervasive sense, and it's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? Like you step into a new role at work, or you have people looking to you now for leadership and direction, or maybe it's in your home, and your kids start asking you tough questions, and all of a sudden you have this feeling like, uh-oh, I'm about to be exposed. I don't know the answers. I don't really know what to do. And you live with this sense like it's gonna be out there, like you're an imposter. You're an imposter, right? You get this sense whenever you read Paul's writings. This is what I love about Paul's writings. Whenever you read Paul's writings, you get this sense that he always had this nagging imposter syndrome kind of hanging around in the back of his mind. But what I love about Paul is he just goes right at it. He doesn't try to hide it. If you've ever wondered if God could still have good plans for you in light of your past and how you may have made a mess of things, I'm telling you, man, Paul is your boy. Because Paul had made a mess of things in his life. And I don't mean like he made a Christian mess of things, like I missed church once when I was 11. I don't mean like a sanitized, I made a mess of my life kind of thing. Paul was responsible for the killing of Christians. Literally oversaw their murders. Paul had torn families apart. That's in his past. And Paul's not proud of these things, which is why he's saying, look, guys, there is nothing about me that qualifies me and makes me feel ready to step into what God is leading me to do. Paul knows who he is. Paul knows what he's done in his life, and he doesn't skirt around it. He doesn't pretend it's not there. He freely acknowledges that those things are real, that those parts of his story are there and that they are real. And some of us here today, man, you resonate. When you hear Paul talk about he's the least deserving, you nod your head a little bit on that because you know your story. You know your past. You know your limits. You know your regrets. And you don't feel deserving of much either. And when you have a past, it's hard sometimes for us to believe that God would have any good plans for us anymore. It's easy to just think about others being sent into this world, like Jesus talked about, to be used by God, but certainly not us. Why? Because we know us. And it's not always a pretty picture. And so on one hand, we feel compelled and our hearts come alive when we start to think that God might have plans for us, to use us in this world to bring hope and life and love to others by pointing them to Jesus. But then there's this double-headed monster. It's like on the other hand, on the other side, there's this double-headed monster that rises his head up and reminds us we're not ready for that. And that double-headed monster is shame and fear. Shame and fear. Shame always says, I shouldn't. I shouldn't. And fear says, I can't. Shame is all about our past. I know who I am. I know what I've done. I shouldn't move forward with that. I shouldn't reach out to them. God, I know you're prompting me to do this. God, I know you're nudging me, but I shouldn't. Fear is about the future. I can't. Like, I know my limitations. I know that I'm not blank enough. You fill in the blank. You got your own stuff to fill in the blank with, right? I'm not experienced enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not spiritual enough. And guys, these two things, shame and fear, they have sidelined so many people from saying yes to the nudges that God has placed in their lives. Over the last year, I'm just shooting straight with you here, shame and fear, they gotten loud a few times in my life. Especially in light of going, man, God, am I going to say yes to some of the nudgings that your promptings that you're giving me right now? It's almost like a few times, just like, who am I to even consider stepping into any sort of this role like this? I'll tell you a funny story. Probably back in, March. One of the things I was doing back in the spring is, late last winter and then into spring, was just getting time with each of the board members individually. And so one morning I had breakfast with one of our board members at the time. His name was Jim. And so we're sitting down, we're having breakfast, we're talking, it's a great conversation, and our waitress walks up to us at one point and says, Jason, I know you don't know me, I just want to introduce myself. So she introduced herself, very, very nice. And then she says, and I just got to tell you this. She says, my son, he was in student ministry, because I used to be in student ministry years ago, and he says, he was in your student ministry at church. He grew up in it, and he just, man, you just left such an indelible mark on his life, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself at this point. And she says, I just have to tell you, for 15 years, he can't stop talking about the Pee Wee Herman impression that you did. Now, let me just give you back up, all right? Listen, guys, I would own this, all right? I've never done a Pee Wee Herman impression in my life. That is something to be proud of, all right? I don't ever remember doing that, though. But now Jim heard this, so I can't be like, oh, no, that wasn't me. You know, Jim's like, Pee Wee Herman, huh? I was like, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that in that moment, this thought kind of struck me. because I've been here for so long. Jason, there's going to be some people that have you stuck where you were 15 years ago. You shouldn't even consider this. And not only that, that's just silly, funny little stuff, but I haven't made a lot of mistakes in 19 years. I can promise you that. I've hurt some people. And Jason, people don't forget all the mistakes that people make, and so you shouldn't even be considering this. Shame. And it didn't take long for then fears to follow. And I started having a lot of thoughts like, man, you know what? For 19 years, I've spoken a lot here. I've preached a lot of different messages for almost 2 decades. Guys, listen, I'm just telling you right now, you've heard everything I have to say if you've been around for a while. I've reached my limit. That's the thought, right? You've reached your limit, Jace. You've got nothing new to say. You can't. Don't you know your limits? Shame, fear, shame, fear. Stay on the sidelines. You got your own shame and fear stories. You got your own. Those shame and fear stories that raise their voices in your life, that make their case as to why you should not say yes to where God's leading you. Paul had them, but he found a way through them that allowed him to keep saying yes to God, even when his shame and his fears told him he wasn't ready. And he told us the way through them. Do you remember how that very first passage we read, do you remember how it started? By God's grace and what? Mighty power. Grace, mighty power. Now I want you to think about this for a second. What do grace and mighty power speak to? What do they directly confront? Shame and fear. See, grace speaks directly to our shame because God says, man, I know what you've done. I know the missteps. I know the messes you've made. I have grace upon grace upon grace for you. Your past is swallowed up in my love and in my grace. I can make you new. God says, your past does not define you. I have incredible plans for you, and nothing in your past disqualifies you from stepping into an incredible future with me. Why? Because of my grace, and it's there for you. But not only that, my power is available to you as well. And what does power speak to? Power speaks to our fears. God says, man, I know your limits. You think I'm surprised by that? I know where your weaknesses are. I know your deficiencies. I know all the things that you don't know. I know your inexperience, all the things that tend to make you think that you're not ready. I know all of those. And I will more than make up for that by giving you everything you need in those moments. My power is available to you. See, guys, this is the counterintuitive path to courageously moving forward, even when you don't feel ready. It's not to go and try to get more ready. That's not how you do it. It's not to fake it and pretend you're ready when you're not. That's not it. Paul said, I don't need to pretend. I know I'm the least deserving. The trick and the key is to rest in God's grace and mighty power. To lean in to who God says you are and who God says He is. You are covered in grace. Your past has been forgiven because of Christ's work on the cross, and He is stronger and more capable and more powerful than any obstacles you will face. And here's why this is so freeing. I hope today some of you, I just hope you feel freedom for some of you today. Do you know what this means? This means that you're not auditioning for anyone. If it's true that His grace can swallow up your past and His power can give you everything you need to step into the future even when you don't feel ready, it means you're not auditioning. You're not auditioning because everything that truly matters most about you has already been settled on the cross. What Jesus has already done for you speaks infinite worth over you. Jesus Christ has already determined that you are worthy of His life. That's how valuable you are to Him, that He would be willing to give His life for you. And there is nothing you can do to change his love towards you. No height or depth or width could separate us from the love of God. And see, here we go. I'm going to shoot straight with some of you. Listen, some of you, you will not risk for God. You've decided you're not going to take risk for God. When you feel the nudge, you're not going to step out. You're not going to risk. You're not going to step out and follow through on the thing that you feel God is compelling you to follow through on, because everything to you is an audition. And you're always trying to prove yourself and your worth and your value. And when you are looking to everyone else to tell you that you're valuable, you'll never take risk. You'll never do something that you don't feel ready for. Why? Because you aren't guaranteed how it will turn out. So you will always play it safe. And as a result, you will never truly experience the depth of God's grace and mighty power at work within you, because you'll never place yourself in a situation where it's needed. And I want to be, from my life, and I want us to be, I want you to be, continually placing ourselves in situations where we don't feel ready. Because that is where we discover grace and mighty power to see us through. We have nothing to lose. If you're following Jesus, you're not auditioning for anything or anyone, because everything that matters most about you has already been settled on the cross. And that's why I felt like I could be honest that day when Jeff looked me in the eyes and asked me that question. So, do you feel ready? No, I don't feel ready. But that's not where I stopped that day in Jeff's office. Because after I said, no, I don't feel ready, what I told him next was, and I don't think I'll feel ready 5 years from now. I don't think I'll feel ready 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm not sure I'll ever feel ready. But I am confident, and I want you to hear this. I am absolutely confident in God's grace and mighty power. I am confident that wherever my gaps are, where I am lacking, God will always fill those spaces up in ways that will be more than adequate. I believe that. I've seen God do that in my life time and time again when I have placed myself in situations where I didn't feel ready, and I believe that for you as well. I believe it for you. And guys, some of you, you've been feeling the nudge of God in your life recently to follow through on something that God's been prompting you to do. And you've been hiding behind your lack of readiness. Some of you, you've been feeling a nudge for a career change. You know it. You've been sensing it. Some of you, you've been feeling a nudge to reach out to that estranged family member or friend to make the first step. Some of you, you've been feeling a nudge recently to start a group here at the church to get others connected. But you've been holding back. Some of you, you've been feeling a nudge to start serving or start a ministry. Some of you, you've been feeling a nudge recently to change colleges. I don't know. Some of us, you've been feeling a nudge. Do not allow shame over your past or fear over your future and what you lack keep you on the sidelines when God is inviting you to follow through on a nudge. You can move forward in confidence because your identity is settled. You're not auditioning because the most important things about you have already been settled on the cross. You're loved already. You're chosen. You're a son. You are a daughter of God if you are in Christ. You can move forward in confidence that those things do not change. And here's what happens when this starts to settle down in your heart. That's when you can finally open up your hands to God and simply say, like the prophet Isaiah said all those years ago, "Here I am, God, send me. Send me. Here I am, send me. I know who I am. I know my past. I know my lack. I do not feel ready. But send me. Because you're more than enough. Your grace and your mighty power will be more than enough for me as I step into something new So send me. Guys, that's been my heart and my prayer for Jenny and I for over 20 years together. We just want to go wherever God is leading us, wherever he's sending us. And if that means that we are sent into a new role that we don't feel quite ready for, we'll say yes. Because our readiness is not a prerequisite for following through on God's leading. So I want to ask you, where's God sending you today? Where's God nudging you today to say yes to him? It could be a big thing, it could be a small thing. Where's he nudging you? It may not be a big new role for you. It might not be a job shift. It may not be a move or a relocation. But he's sending you. He's sending you into your school, into your workplace, into your team, into your home. He sent you into your neighborhood, and although you may not feel ready for it, his grace and mighty power are at work in you to give you all that you need to point people to Jesus wherever he sent you. And all he's asking is that we just say yes to him. Even though we know our past, and even though we know our limits, he's okay with it. He just wants us to say yes and discover that his grace and his mighty power are enough.
live to hear you say, here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, oh send me. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. Oh, I love you. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh my answer will be yes, 'cause I love you. I love you.
Guys, you don't have to feel ready to say yes to God's leading before you do. We can confidently say, send me into whatever situation, God, you want to send me into. I know who I am. I know my limits. I know my shortcomings, but I'm not auditioning for anyone because everything that matters most about me has already been settled on the cross. So I'm going to say yes. His grace and His mighty power are more than enough so we can move forward confidently even when we don't feel ready. Listen, if you'd like to pray with someone today about anything, down in the front of your room, down to the left, we have some people who would love to have the opportunity to pray with you as soon as we're done here. And if you're online right now, just stick around for a few minutes and feel free to let our chat host know how we can be praying for you. They would love to have that privilege. And listen, do not forget to make plans now to be part of our Christmas gatherings coming up in just a few weeks. And so if you're at one of our locations on the way out today, make sure you stop, grab your tickets today for you and your family, but maybe way more importantly, grab a few extra to use as an invitation to bring someone with you when you come to our Christmas gatherings. So let's just see what God does as a result of that invitation. Until then, LCBC, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you His favor and give you His peace. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week.